Hello and welcome to this channel where our goal is to provide Oracle related educational content for your personal and professional development. And if you like content like this and eventually find this channel helpful, go ahead and like this video. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Enable notifications also to stay informed of when we release new content, and do not forget to share. Our first video is the first part of a two-part series. And the first part is we would, in this video, demonstrate how we can create an Oracle Linux 7.3 virtual server within the Oracle VirtualBox. So in order for us to be able to achieve that, there are some requirements that we need. First of all, on a laptop, and some of you might be using your desktops, you might need at least 8 gigabytes of RAM and at least 500 gigabytes of hard disk space. So in terms of software requirements, we would of course need the Oracle VirtualBox Manager installed on your laptop or desktop. And in addition to that, you can find that Oracle VirtualBox Manager from the virtualbox.org website, and make sure you download the one that's indicated for the Windows host. You should also download and install an SSH tunneling software. Most commonly, you can use PuTTY, and you can download that from PuTTY.org. And my personal preference, I like using MobiXtem. You can download that from the link you see on the screen. And you should download the home edition, which is free. It also has an installer edition. So for the key software pieces that we need an Oracle Linux 7, the update 3 boot ISO image for Linux 8664. And you can download that from the edeliveryoracle.com website. Make sure you search for Oracle Linux 7 and choose the DLP package. And as well, make sure that you're downloading this particular ISO image, which is the Oracle Linux release 7 of the 3, with the file size of about 4.3 gigabytes. If you choose the wrong ISO, certainly you would have issues with the installation. Now, in our part 2 series, the video following this one, we would be looking at how to install an Oracle Database 12c, specifically release 2 on this newly created Oracle Linux 7 server. And also for the requirements, you would need that software, and you can also go ahead and download that from the edelivery.com website. Make sure you search for Oracle Database 12.2 and download this particular file. It's a zip file, 3.2 gigabytes. And we would show you in the video, of course, how to get that going. Now, in terms of pre-setup, because I would be using multiple network interfaces in subsequent videos, we just want to set the base at this point. I would like for you guys to create a host-only network adapter on your Oracle virtual machine. And in order for you to do that, you would have to go through the file, host network manager, and then do the create. In my system already, if I do the file, host network manager, I go out there. You certainly wouldn't do the create at this. I wouldn't do the create because I already have. But here is the create button. If you go ahead and hit create, it is going to ask you certainly to create a new host-only network. And it's as easy as this. Now, what you need to do for this then is to make sure that you configure that adapter manually, and you would set an IPv4 address range. Now, I don't need this one, so I'm going to take it off, but I'm going to show you what I have in my virtual host only, my VirtualBox host only Ethernet adapter set. So I'm going to go ahead and remove this one. So what I expect you guys to have, if you're following my video, is to make sure that you configure your adapter manually to 192 for the IPv4 address 192.168.56 and 1, and an IPv4 network mask 255.255.255.0. And sometimes you would see this is going to be enabled automatically. I would like for you to disable it. And when you do that, of course, you would click apply if it's a new host only adapter you're doing. But right now, I'm not making any changes to the one I have. So I am going to exit out of that. Now, I do already have these files. I already have my ISO image, bootable image, and I do have my database software already downloaded. So let's go ahead and create a new Linux server, shall we? In order to do that, we go on the new. You can either go through the new tab or you can go to machine and hit the new button. Either way, that works for you. So let's go ahead and hit new. I would call this, say I'm creating maybe a primary server, SRV, I'll call it prime serve, and I would of type Linux. It usually defaults to Oracle 64-bit. And I would hit next. I would allocate it some memory. I would give it as much as maybe 4. Depending on how much memory you have on your laptop, usually Oracle Linux 7, 3 gig, 4 gig typically would be the minimum at which we can run that. So let's go ahead and hit next. We would certainly create a virtual hard disk. I go ahead and create. I would leave the default to the VirtualBox disk image, and I would dynamically allocate that and give it a size of, say, maybe 100. I would give it 100. I just manually type that and then I hit create. Now we have that image already created here, but then it's not a server already because we have to go through the installation. But before we do that, we have to make some changes to the settings. The settings is right here. You can right click on this and go to settings, but you can also highlight that and click on settings up here. General settings, our name, we already did that. Advanced, at this point, I would like us to do a bidirectional, and this comes handy when your server has already been configured, where you can copy from your laptop and paste in your virtual machine, and copy from your virtual machine and paste in your laptop as well. It's a really cool functionality. In terms of description, I just want to describe what this is. This is going to be an Oracle Linux 7.3 server. That's what I'll call it. Now let's go ahead and go to system. System, we already allocated 4 gig of memory. I would uncheck the floppy here. I'm not going to need this one. In terms of processors, I would give it 2 CPUs, and that's all we would do at the level of the system. Now, one more thing. I would encourage you guys to change your pointing device. Currently, it's a PS2 mouse. I would encourage you to change it to either USB tablet or USB multi-touch tablet. It makes the mouse a little user-friendly when you're doing the installation, going back and forth your virtual machine. So I'll choose USB tablet. In terms of display, I'm not going to make any changes at this point. In terms of storage, this is where I would choose that bootable image, this bootable image, so that when we start up this virtual machine, it knows exactly what image to use to boot and run our installation from. So I would go ahead and click on this empty right here. And on the right side, there is a little black arrow. If you look carefully, I would click down on it. I would click down on it, and I hope my machine is not freezing. I would click down on this, and then I would choose a disk file. Now, usually when you download this, you would probably save it. It's going to download by default to your downloads folder. But in my case, I created a folder OL7 on my desktop where I have that image copied to. So I would choose that image, and I just give it some time, and now we have it right here. Audio, I'm not going to make any changes. Network, this is important for us to understand. So the reason we did the VirtualBox host-only adapter was because I want to configure this virtual server with 2 network interfaces. The NAT network, you can use that, but I usually like to assign static IPs to my virtual boxes, to my virtual machines. And at the same time, the NAT network also helps, that intercommunication between the virtual machine and, my laptop, and gives it the possibility certainly to access the internet. So I would like to leave this NAT network and enable a second adapter. I check on the enable, click on that, this is where I would choose my host only adapter. And when I do that, then that should be done with my network, initial network configurations. Serial ports, I'm not going to make any changes to all what's left. And I would leave it the way it is. And I validate that with an OK. Once that is done, I would start my server at this point. I can do that in two ways. I can right click and then do the green start, or I can do the start right from up here as long as this one is highlighted. So I'll go ahead and start that so that we can begin our installation process. Now, for those of you, depending on what your display settings are, it might show up looking a little small like this. What I'll do is I'll go to View, go right down to Virtual Screen, and I will choose the auto scale to 200%. So that keeps it a little nice for us to be able to see. There is a countdown, automatic put in 43 seconds, but it defaults at test this media and install Oracle Linux 7.3. I would use my up and down arrow keys to choose just the install Oracle 7.3. And then I hit enter. And then I wait for that bootable image to be detected. And certainly we would proceed with that install. Now, if you see the auto capture option turned on, it's safe for you to click on this X on the side, just to close it. That way you have a little bit of visual on your virtual machine. So we wait for a pause and then we wait for our installer to start. All right, so now we are on our installation screen. So we are just going to follow the prompts, right? Certainly it's English, I'm in the United States, so it's English United States, and I would go with continue. And it is very important that we make sure that we pick the right options for installation. So I'm located on US Central Time. It currently says America's New York time zone. And if you're particular about the time zone in which you are, you can change that. I know for sure that a city like Chicago is on my time zone. So I would look for Chicago and choose that. Just give me a second, it's taking a little longer. Let's see here, sorry. I'll just go ahead and do Chicago right here. Okay, here comes Chicago, here we go. And that's all I'm changing on this page, and I do done. I'm not gonna change the language because we already chose that. The English is US keyboard. Installation source is the local media, which was that bootable disk image that we saw. And I want the installation destination. Now we are going to come and do a software selection here in just a second, but let's choose our installation destination. It by default already chooses the VirtualBox hard disk, which we decided to create. I typically wouldn't change anything here. Now, you would see some documentation that would say maybe you would configure your partitioning by yourself. I just let it do automatically configure. I'll just let it automatically configure my partitioning at this point, because this is, like I said, this is just for educational purposes. I click on done, and that cleans up. Let's do software selection. And if we go to software selection, we want to install a server with GUI. GUI stands for Graphical User Interface. So I would go ahead and click that. Now with GUI, there are so many options, and you would come across several different documentations that lets you pick specific options. But I would go ahead and choose all the options that I see here, just to make sure that I don't have any shortcomings after I am done with my installation. So I would pull this down. There are many options. I'll just go ahead and check all of them. Most importantly, the options at the bottom, the compatibility libraries are very important. Development tools, security tools, smart card. So I have chosen all the options, and I would click on done to validate that. And after a little pause, that would come up as checked. While that is working, we would work on our network and host name settings. So I would click on network and host name settings. Remember, we chose two network interfaces, the NAT network and the VirtualBox host only adapter. The first one, the ENP0S3, represents our NAT network. And this is just going to be automatic. So I'm going to toggle this from off to on. And at the same time, I'm going to click on the configure button. And within the options that I find, under general, there is a checkbox for automatically connect to this network when it's available, and I want to choose that. I save the settings, and that's the only thing I'm going to do for the NAT network. And for the ENP0S8, I certainly would toggle this on as well. And this is where I would assign a static IP. I would click on configure, also ensure that we would connect to this network whenever it is available. But under the IPv4 settings, I would click on IPv4 settings, and for the method, I would change this to manual. So on manual, there isn't any addresses here. So I would click on add, because I would want to define that new static IP that I can use to connect from my external system into the virtual machine. So the format usually is the 192.168.56, and I'll just give it 101. I'll just start the count at 101 and move forward. Now the net mask by default 24, I can leave it at that, or I can do a 255.255.255.0. Remember that we have a net mask stated this way. So we just want to make sure that we are on the same net mask. And on the gateway, I can leave it that way, or I can add a 0.0.0.0, and I would require IPv4 addressing for this connection to complete. Once those changes are done, I go ahead and do a save. The last thing we're going to do on this page before we move forward is our host name. Remember, we gave this server a name. We call it our primary, we're calling it our primary server, primserv, SRV. And I'm just going to leave the domain at local domain. All right, so primserv local domain, and I would do an apply to this. So the current host name now changes to primserv at local domain. And I would finalize this by clicking on the done. So right now I am ready to begin my installation. Once this installation begins, I will pause the video in the interest of time, and then we would resume at the end of when the installation is complete, when we need to reboot. So I would begin my installation. Once you begin your installation, you're going to be prompted for root password and a user creation. Now, for those of you who are familiar with system administration, root is the system administrator. Root owns the installation of the operating system, the Linux operating system. Root is the ultimate user. So we would click on root to set root's password. I would choose a simple password. By default, for my test environments, I use the password Oracle. That really sounds weak, but I just try to keep it standard. It's telling me that the password has to be shorter than 8 characters. You will have to press done twice in order to confirm it. So if I press done once, it would require me to press done again to validate that. I would just go ahead and create another user, because if I don't do that now, it's going to require me to do that eventually. So let's go ahead and create that user. I would just call this user admin and let the username be admin. It's going to ask me if I want to make this user an administrator. I don't want to make that user an administrator. I want to let just root be the administrator of this operating system. And for password, I would do the same. I'll just give it an Oracle password. It's going to tell me it's weak. It's okay, I know. And I would have to press done twice to confirm it. So I would just go ahead and do that. So right now, the installation has started. This is going to take some time. So in the interest of the length of the video, I would pause this video right now and certainly resume this video when we get to the end. All right, guys, we're back. So the installation took approximately 20 to 25 minutes. So at this point, it says complete and it's asking us to reboot. So let's go ahead and do that. We wait for the system to reboot, and then we will proceed with the final settings. Now we'll just let it start. And I think we're going to get to the part where we have to accept the licensing agreement terms. So here is going to ask us for licensing information. We have not accepted that. So we're going to click here and scroll down. If you want to go ahead and read the licensing, that's good. But we go ahead and accept the license agreement, and we click on done. So we are going to go ahead and finish the configuration right now. Our system says our network and host name. It says everything is connected. ENP0S8 and ENP0S3 are all connected right now. So let's go ahead and finish our configuration. All right, so at this point, it's going to ask us to log in as admin. Remember, we created admin, we created root. Root is the operating system owner. Root is the administrative user. So root will not be listed here on your login. You want to go ahead and click on not listed. So let's go ahead and click on not listed and type the root username. Next is going to ask us for a password for root, and we would do Oracle. So the initial screen is going to prompt us to kind of maybe personalize a little bit. We ignore this R error right here. I'm just going to go ahead and click out of it. We're going to stay with English. Next. We're going to stay with US English. Next. We're going to skip this online accounts. And now we are ready to start using our Linux server. So at this point, we are not done. We have some post-installation configurations to do. And the first one of them would be, in order to make this a little bit more user-friendly, we have what we call guest additions. So we are going to go under devices, and we would insert the guest additions image. So if we click here, we wouldn't have to do anything else. When that guest addition CD gets inserted, you would see a prompt right here that says run. So let's go ahead and run that. So it's going to go take a little while. While that is happening, I would like for us to go on applications. And under applications, we would have our favorites, and we would get a terminal. Let's click on that terminal. Remember, the purpose we have two network interfaces is because we want our NAT network to be able to give us access to the internet via our current either laptop or desktop that we're using. So to test if we have that, we would use a ping command. And I would use the ping with the C switch for count. I want to send 5 packets to google.com to see if we are able to get reception from that. So we are sending 5 packets. It looks like our 5 packets are being received, 5 packets transmitted, 5 packets received, and there is 0 packet loss. So confirming that we are able to access the web, access the internet from our VirtualBox. So that is good. I'm just going to go ahead and minimize this and wait for our VirtualBox modules to build up. It shouldn't take too long. Okay, good. So when that finishes, you would see the press return to close window. So let's go ahead and press that, and that's good. So at this point, you have one of 2 choices. You can leave the VirtualBox disk image in here. I really don't like it in here. I can right click on it and maybe eject it. So if I eject that, that goes away. So we are good. So for our next piece of settings, we have to make them a little bit more user-friendly. After our guest additions, I want us to maybe configure some security options on this. Now, when we talk about security options, primarily we're going to talk about the SE Linux. SE Linux stands for Secure Linux. If the operating system is to be used for an Oracle installation, it would be easier if Secure Linux is disabled or switched to permissive. In order to do this, there is a certain file that we are going to edit. So if we cut the contents of this file, which is an etc, if I can type, that would be nice. The etc SE Linux config file. So let's cut, because the cut command would just help us view the contents of this config of the SE Linux file. So it says here currently that SE Linux is enforcing. Now we want to change enforcing to either permissive or disabled. So I would use the VI editor for this current file, the etc SE Linux config file, and I would use the I key on the keyboard to switch to insert mode, move my cursor down to where I have enforcing, and I would delete this, use the deleting key, and then I would replace this with permissive. I would leave it at that. Control, I would use escape shift colon WQ to save that. Now, the next thing we are going to do would be to disable firewall. Now, again, like I mentioned, if the operating system is to be used for an Oracle installation, you would need to either disable or configure the local firewall. In this case, I would probably just go ahead and proceed to disable it. So first of all, I would use the systemctl command to stop the firewall daemon. Firewall D. So let's stop that. And once I stop that, now I am able to use the systemctl disable firewall D. So let's do that. So now that is done. Now, in some cases, I have seen some people, disable the SSH daemon. But in our case, I think I would want to leave it this way. So in order to make sure that our system is ready to go, I would probably just reboot the system. And I could either use the shutdown and then restart it, or I would use the init6 command. The init6 command would reboot this system. When we return, when the system comes back up, I would connect to it using MobileXterm just to show that we are able to access that system from our local desktop or laptop or whatever we used. So let's give it some time for it to boot. We would, run some commands to make sure that we know what the host name is, what the IP address for this new virtual Linux 7.3 virtual server is, and we would use that information to connect to this server. So again, like I mentioned earlier, if it's not listed, you click on not listed, do root, and then the password is Oracle, and we are back in. One last thing that I would need us to do, like I mentioned, would be we open another terminal and we kind of look at some specifics. So let's go ahead and open another terminal and let's type host name. What is the host name of this new server? Host name is prim serve local domain. Let's check what the IP address is. Host name -i. Now, I wouldn't be surprised if it gets a little confusing because we haven't put in an entry in our etc or etc host file. So we have a bit of a confusion here on what the IP address is. So in order for us to be able to see, and permit me, let me make this a little bit bigger. That way we have a full screen and we can see what's going on. So if I type an if config, so that we see what our different network interfaces are, ENP0S3 is our loopback, is actually our NAT network. Our ENP0S8 is a host-only adapter, and the IP address for that is this. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that, and I would make an entry into in the etc host file. So I would, using the VI editor, I would make an entry into the etc hosts file. So again, I would hit the I key to switch to insert mode. I toggle all the way down, all the way to the end. I can either use the left and right arrows, or I can hit the end. I can touch the end button to take me to the end, and then I go enter. Now I can right click and paste that IP address. I do tab. We had a server called primserve, and I do a tab again, and I do prim server.local domain. So that is how I would put that entry in our etc tab. I hit escape, I shift colon, and then WQ to save it. So let's see if those changes took effect. I will cut the contents of my etc host file, and now we see that. Now you would also want to see that the host name -i now shows only the IP address for our host only adapter. Now, for those of you who are familiar with Linux commands, you can do host name CTL to see what this current server has been configured to. So our server host name, a static host name is primserve.local domain. Our icon name, the MAC IDs, and all of that good stuff. All right, so at this point, let's test to see if we are able to connect from our external system. So for that, remember I mentioned in the beginning, we have, I use Mobile XTEM a lot, and I would click on Mobile XTEM right here to launch a session of Mobile XTEM. And in order for me to do that, I would go to the session to start a remote connection. I click on SSH, and for my remote host, I would use that same IP address, the 192.168.56.101, specifying a username root. So if I do enter, it's going to ask me for root's password, and I would go with Oracle. And guys, we are able to finally get to the end of our installation of our new Oracle Linux 7.3 server. So if you followed the video till the end, well done. If you like the video, throw some comments down at the bottom. Like the video, subscribe to the channel. In our next videos, we would be using this virtual server to perform different exercises. The second part of this video, like I mentioned earlier, would be installing the Oracle database 12C release 2. Thank you for watching.